We are live.
Good evening. Welcome to the Elyria City Council, March 1st, 2021. We are Zooming and streaming live. At this time, I'd like everyone to stand up for a moment of reflective silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Baird, would you please lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of
of the United States
of America and to the
republic
for which it
which
stands,
stands
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baird. Mr. Clerk, I have roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Mr. Callahan,
Here.
Mr. Sierra,
Here.
Mr. Oswald,
Here.
Mr. Baird,
Here.
Mrs. Mitchell,
Here.
Mr. Tollett,
Here.
Mrs. Simmons,
Here.
Mrs. Davis,
Here.
Mrs. Keys,
Here.
Mr. Jesse,
Here.
and Mr. Stewart,
Here.
all present.
Public hearings.
There are none.
I get approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Mr.
Second.
Sarah, second by Ms. Keys. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Remarks and reports from city officials. Before I get into that, I kind of, over the time, have spoken with everybody just about in regards to the COVID and where we're at with coming back into council chambers. I spoke with the committee chairs, Mr. Callahan, Ms. Mitchell, and Mr. Jesse. I've had conversations with him in regards to that. So next Monday, finance, and I don't know if with community development, but going back into council chambers for our meeting there, and then moving forward, going to full on the 15th, going into council chambers as a whole. Now, I did speak with Mr. Henderson in regards to, those who still are uncomfortable about coming into council chambers. He assured me that this would be a smooth transition if we still wanted to. Those who still wanted to stream and do the Zooming, that is fine. I think we can all work through all that, but safety measures will still be in place with the masks and the side shields we have on through those, and then we'll limit it to the amount of people into the chambers as well. And I've coordinated with Mr. Brubaker this evening to make sure that we're all, following those procedures and policies. So I just kind of wanted to say that tonight. I think we all look forward to getting back in through there, but still, having caution and safety at that. So I just kind of wanted to relay that to everybody. With that being said, Mayor Wilfield has kind of deferred his comments this time to Assistant Fire Chief Presti. Mayor Whitfield, if you want to kind of weigh a little bit before.
Yes, thank you, Council President. So good evening, council members. Good evening, residents of Elyria. As what's top of mind with most folks right now is downtown Elyria. And as you know, we had a devastating fire last week. And just want to give special kudos out again to our fire department, as well as the mutual aid and all the city staff to help contain that fire and preserve so much property and also preserve lives. And so I'm going to defer my report. There's a lot of other things that folks want to talk about. I would just, want people to know then this Thursday, I'll be having the State of the City address in partnership with the City of Lorraine. And a lot of the questions that have come up, we're going to make sure we're addressed, including what's the plan for rebuilding downtown. That'll be addressed in my State of the City address. So this Thursday, March 4th. And Ren is in now. All right. So, and now I'll defer the rest of my comments to Assistant Chief Presti, who I just want to give him a special shout out before I pass to him. His leadership that night. Councilman Stewart, you were on site as well. It was something to be seen. just how thorough and decisive you were, but at the same time, how compassionate you were and your concern for the life safety of not only if there were people that were to be saved, but also just the staff. And I just wanted to give you that acknowledgement publicly that, I'd never seen anything like that before, and it was an honor and a pleasure to have someone like you on site that was giving guidance and direction on what to do. So just want to give you that special shout out and thank you, and I'll pass it over to him.
All right. Well,
Rusty.
thank you. I appreciate it, Mayor. It was really the guys that did it and the gals that responded from all over the county. And I've been fighting fires either in my head or real since I was 2 or 3. So it comes natural, I think, sometimes, but really it's the guys that did it. So what I wanted to do tonight is I wanted to give a little brief overview of what took place, a little bit about the building. As you know, it was a concerning building to the fire department. I've been in that building numerous times before the fire, and I'll start with a little overview about the building from where we were at. Can everybody see the slide there?
Yes.
Okay. So, why was this so hazardous? The building is just a very unusual building for the city, in the city. It's pinched between the Robinson building and the railroad tracks. That second bullet point, there was unoccupied apartments, but I'll show you why that played such a problem or a role in our ability to fight the fire. We did not go inside because of where you see the bullet point of maze-like conditions. If we had sent firefighters inside, I can only say this probably the only time in my career where I felt that if we had sent firemen inside, we would have injured or killed them. Okay, so I'll just be blunt about that. And I feel very strongly about that. There was 4 shafts in the building. And another problem, which kind of limited us in the beginning stages, is the main power line coming into the city. 64,000 volt lines are along the tracks there. So we just couldn't go to work like we wanted to. So that was that part. Think of if you are a basketball fan, I want you to think of a 3-point shot. You were less than a 3-point shot away from the Robinson building going up. I'm going to show you some drone footage from Elyria Police. While I'm at it, I'm going to say this. I've unfortunately probably used the drones more than anybody on fires recently. And I want to just give a kudos to Chief Whiteley, Captain Hammonds, and the rest of the officers, especially those that run the drones. They are an incredible piece of equipment. And whoever okayed that purchase long ago, kudos, because we got technology that is just unbelievable for a city our size, for a fire department our size. It's unheard of. And so it helped us out tremendously. And I will show you just how close we were as far as losing the Robinson building by showing you the infrared images from the drone, and you'll see the Robinson building smoking. Just a quick little overview of the complex. It's not going to take long. So you can grasp the size and enormity. I know all of you are very up and aware of Elyria, but this building was built in 2 parts. The smaller part, 4-story part, was built in 1898 or 99. The 6-story, what we call Washington Towers, was built about a year or 2 later. Lots of renovations, and you can just see the enormous size of it. Now, one thing that we have done with it was something that I kind of spearheaded with the police department, is that I have drone footage of all the downtown buildings so we can better pre-plan them. And that certainly helped. This was part of that footage of pre-planning that the police department was able to help us with back last year. So we have that footage on all the downtown buildings, which helps us tremendously. The other factor that really came into play was the wind. We had some sustained winds of 20 to 25 miles per hour that just made this fire race through the building. I will say that there was a concern. I know you read that there was, arrests made. There was concern about kids being inside. And I'll get to that in a little bit as far as we go further on, as far as some of the other hazards there. These were some shots that were taken before the fire, obviously, but the amount of debris inside was also a concern to us that, we all probably have been in there when it was VIX or Mardi Gras, but the amount of storage in there from when I took these pictures, I do not know if it was removed since then, but I had to take that into account that it was still there. This is just one iota, and I don't want to take up all your time on it, but we were under the impression that the building was still full of debris and material that's going to burn. And I think based on that fire, I will say in my experience that fire didn't burn like that, just feeding off of the construction features of the building. The construction features of the building is reinforced concrete, and concrete is not going to burn very, very readily. This was the biggest problem we had on the 4th floor, and why you may be getting phone calls and getting complaints. And I spoke to Chief Whiteley tonight. You're going to get calls for smoke and everything. The 4th floor is what we call an inner core apartment complex, and you can see that glass block. On the left-hand side, where you see on the opposite of the apartments is facing the exterior of the building, whether it's on Washington Avenue or on Kerstetter. These apartments, center core and the 4th floor, run the complete building. We could not get our streams in because it would hit those walls that you would see. And what's in those apartments, the last I was in there, is stuff. And that is what's smoldering, and that is what's keeping us from, it's going to keep burning. That's about as best I can tell it. But this is one of the biggest reasons why is on that 4th floor is you basically have, again, what's called an inner core apartments and hallway. So we can't penetrate that with our streams. This was our biggest number one concern. Probably sometime in the 60s, maybe a little later, the roof of the Kerstetter side. So picture in your head's the Kerstetter side, the 4-story side. Above the 4th floor, they had deterioration of the roof, the concrete roof, the constant vibrations of the railroad, I'm assuming. But over time, what they ended up doing was they put shores up, and they had tons and tons of lumber. My biggest fear that night was that the fire was going to catch that. This is what we call a 4A. This is kind of like the attic space above the 4th floor of the Kerstetter side of the building. If that lumber had went, the collapse would have been catastrophic. It would have what we call pancake down if those shores had burned through, in my opinion. We called for a urban search and rescue engineer that we kind of keep on, I don't want to say retainer, but kind of like mutual aid, that is for our northeast section of Ohio. He arrived on scene, and I explained to him the building. He took some walk around the building a couple times, and he was concerned. The other problem that would have been a concern is what the cast iron supports that are on that floor. The cast iron is exposed. Cast iron is very strong in compression, but once the building starts to shift, cast iron is very thin and brittle and can collapse. And these are pictures, again, taken several years ago. So obviously from the time I've taken these pictures till now, the building had probably further deteriorated. But I just wanted council and everybody to know that this is why we could not go in and we could not get crews in. And to this day, in this hour, we're not putting anybody in. The top floors of the Washington Avenue side, if you look at photos or video, The top floors are vintage paneling from the 50s and 60s. Just from hearing stories from older firefighters and people in my father's generation, I guess there was like a business school and all kinds of stuff up on the upper floors. Well, it was all separated by 1950s and 60s era paneling, which is extremely flammable and led probably to feed the fire even more. So this was on the Washington side on the 5th and 6th, what you had. Again, I don't know what has been cleaned up or what hasn't, but this was when I went through the building to pre-plan it years ago. You know, they had all kinds of construction and equipment. Now, again, this was years ago. This was built, this was prior to the new owner and all that. But these were things that I had to think of, whether they were gone or not. I had to err on the side that they were there. And you know, it's just one of those things. I want you to watch this, because if everything else, what I'm asking and what I would respectfully ask for the mayor and the director is that there are a few individuals that deserve a commendation. And I'm going to give a shout out to Assistant Chief Kevin Zabo. When Kevin arrived on scene, he was assigned to protect the Robinson building. And it was probably one of the hardest assignments that I've seen in my career for what we call exposure protection. So I'm giving him a shout out publicly, but I encourage somebody here listening to put a letter in that assistant chief's file, because he single-handedly saved this building with mutual aid companies who didn't even know where the Robinson building is if you told them to come to the Robinson building in downtown Elyria. So he was working with firefighters from around the county that aren't used to these kind of buildings, and he did one heck of a job. But I want you to watch this when I play this. Again, this is from Elyria Police drone. I want you to look now. It's on my right hand of the screen, so I think it should be on your right hand of the screen also. That is the Robinson building to your right. So any red is heat. So now as this camera's turning, it's turning, and that tower, you could pretty much orient it to looking now south. So it's turning to where it's from the tracks at the bottom of your screen towards the Robinson building. And you can see the heat signatures that were on the Robinson building. This is where the Elyria Police drone paid off, because we were able to see, we were not putting anybody in the alley, but we were able to see that heat, and we were able to relay that information to Assistant Chief Zabo, who was able to get some streams going to at least cool that alley from inside the Robinson building. They were, and I don't like to embellish, I don't want to make it add more drama to the situation, but you came extremely, extremely close to losing the Robinson building and the powerhouse gym. Again, a 3-pointer distance away was all that was there. So this is a good example of the drone and how we were utilizing it to save the Robinson building and the powerhouse. One other thing that was a concern you'll see in this real quick, and this is my last slide, so I appreciate it. If you look at the screen, you will see what's called flying brands. We had flying brands that were landing on the downtown buildings. At this point, we were out of people. We couldn't tap any more fire departments than what we did unless we went into Cuyahoga County. But those flying brands were flying on top of downtown buildings. They ended up landing on a cross. Forgive me, I don't know the name of it, the building, but right across. I call it the old Keith's Comics, if you're familiar with the building on the corner of Middle and Broad. They were landing on that building. If we had not seen this drone footage again and see the brands, we may have missed any kind of potential until it was too late, until we had fire on the roof of that building. So the drone paid off, but again, the guys, the credit goes to the firefighters, and they did a tremendous job. Lastly, I will say this. This fire was 10 times more challenging than the fire we had at General Industries because of what we call, again, the exposures. We have to we have to do a better job and get into our buildings. And I hope that we can work together. But fire prevention and the inspections has to happen. We got to get in. So that's about, go ahead. That's about all I got. I'll be happy to take any questions.
I got a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Oswald.
Just thinking about tearing that building down, what are you looking at with it leaning towards the train track and possibly not ending up over there? Have you been involved with the demolition?
We were involved in the demolition through you, Council President. We were involved in the beginning stages. Yes, we were worried about it coming down on top of the tracks. Train traffic has been lowered to, I think, half speed, which is like 35 miles per hour, I think. It's going to take a long time for this building to come down. That was a mistake that I made. I assumed in my career, when we called for what we call an emergency demo, man, in like that and knock it down and we go home. I didn't realize it was going to take this long. So they have to be very careful. And that's why they're taking so long, in my opinion. I'm sure maybe the director can give you a better information on that, but they're biting at it. As if you go downtown, I guess the old analogy of how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? That's probably what they're doing with the heavy equipment.
Thank you.
Go ahead. I don't know the protocol.
I'm getting a lot of interference, Chief.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you, Council President, through you too, Mr. Praneski. First of all, thank you and all the firemen and all the mutual aid. You guys did an outstanding job in extenuatingly difficult situation. And I know I speak for all of council when we say we appreciate it and thank you very much. But I just have one quick question, and it may not be for you, Mr. Praneski, but perhaps for Mr. Brubaker. Do you meet resistance from the building owners when you try to get in to do the inspections?
If I can answer that, the biggest problem, Councilwoman Mitchell, is this. We got a lot of vacant ones. So it's hard. I'll give you, for instance, I take rookie firefighters with me when they come on my shift. I take them to some of the buildings like Flowers by Sharon, through Washington Towers. I've done that throughout my career as an officer on the fire department. The problem is when you go to a vacant, we can't break in. And so it's the vacant ones that we got to get in. But like the occupied ones, they're great. And we just show up and say, hey, I tell them I got some young firefighters that need to get through this building. And for instance, the Flowers by Sharon, that's one building I take every rookie firefighter in. She's wonderful. She's like, yeah, come on in. And we come through. It's the vacant ones we got to get in, Councilwoman.
Mr. President, if I may, just a follow up. Corey, I'm getting a lot of feedback, but what is the answer for the vacant ones? What can we do? Like you said, we can't break in, perhaps, Mr. Brubaker. What do we do? Do we have keys? What do we do?
Through you, Mr. President, to Councilwoman Mitchell, the building department has no authority to make entry into buildings unless they are invited in. Their authority is from the public right of way. So anything that they can see from the public right of way, the exterior of the building is all they can cite somebody for unless they are invited in. If it's an apartment and they're invited in an apartment and the tenant signs a form allowing them to make entry into it. So the building department can't get in there. The fire department, however, on commercial buildings has the authority through their annual inspections, but it goes back to what Assistant Chief Praneski said. The vacant ones, what it'll have to come down to is finding the ownership and notifying the ownership that these inspections need to be made.
Thank you, Mr. Brubaker.
Anybody else have questions? Councilman
I do.
Oswald?
I've got one
If
for
we're
you.
getting a lot of interference, I apologize.
I'm sorry.
Mr. Oswald.
Through you, Mr. President, and here again, Mr. Pernesti or Mr. Brubaker. I know we got a rental registration deal that we have to sign all our rental properties. You know, if these vacant buildings have registrations on these, they should be able to get a hold of these owners and try to get inside some of them, because yeah, this is a problem when you can't at least go in and see structural damage by chance could ruin other buildings. Do we got any pull with the rental registration, or don't they have to register? Thank you, Mr. President.
Through you,
Mr. President,
Mr.
Mr. President, through you, the rental registration program is for residential properties or apartment complexes. It's not for commercial buildings.
It should be.
All right, well, through you, Council President, Mr. Oswald, that's something that the council could certainly consider.
Yes, I think that will be, we'll have this, we'll look into that and we'll get it referred here so that we can kind of get on top of this. Mr. Callahan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Through you, I had a question earlier, but basically Councilwoman Mitchell pretty much covered my topic that I had for Assistant Chief Pernesti. But in saying that, I just want to relay my thoughts to the Assistant Chief Pernesti that thank you for doing a wonderful job. Thank all your men. It was a tough challenge. I know I heard your interview on the radio that night. I'm thankful that everybody's okay. Nobody got hurt. Just Godspeed to everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Stay safe.
Okay. With that being said, I want to echo what the mayor had said earlier, just to see Assistant Fire Chief Pernesti coordinate that, the communication with, I don't know if Joe, as far as mutual aid, was it 15 or how many? It's on
More than that. I think out of 22, 23 fire departments, I think we had them all but 2.
Yeah. So can you just imagine the coordination for all of that? And really, you know, it's just a phenomenal job, and it was just awesome to see. But really, you know, all those mutual aids, and then, you know, the Elyria Police Department, like Joe had mentioned, with Chief Whiteley and their staff, but really the other city workers that were there blocking off the streets, that all played a part in that. And it was just incredible to see. And then, like he said, they did save the Dixon building, or the Powerhouse Gym, and the Robinson building, just based on that technology. So it was, again, this is the money well invested in the drones, and that's other things that we need to continue to be forward thinking in that, because it did save not only, you know, those buildings, but lives, like the mayor said. So tremendous job, Joe, to you and the department.
Thank you.
Any other further comments regarding that?
If anybody has any questions further, you want to email me, you know where to find me.
Very good.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay. Mayor Whitfield, did you want to comment anything more within for you?
No, I'll defer to the rest of the 6.
Okay, very good. Safety Service Director Brubaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've been on over the last 12 or 14 years, many calls with Assistant Chief Pernesti, and I will echo what the mayor said. His professionalism and the way he handles a scene, quite frankly, is second to none. He has the respect of his men. He has the respect of other departments, and they listen. So kudos to him and his team, as the mayor already said. But I do want to reach out, you know, Councilman Stewart, you mentioned several other departments. Well, we called in our street department to support the police department. We had officers that were on duty blocking many streets. In order to alleviate that, we were able to bring in the street department who barricaded off multiples of streets to protect the firefighters and to keep vehicles from coming down. Our water distribution team, we called them in to help support the shuttle trucks. The shuttle trucks were going to tie in the different hydrants And early on, they were tying into the same lines as our firefighters were using to fight the fire. So our distribution team, knowing our lines, were able to move these water trucks down Middle Avenue, south side of town, South Middle Avenue, as well as East River, to pull from hydrants that were not going to alleviate or cause problems for the firefighters. So they were able to work with them. Our communications team, particularly our electricians, were on site to help with the generator at the police department when electric was lost, as well as some other electrical issues that were on site. And then water pumping. I know Assistant Chief asked several times about upping the water pressure. They had to continue to pump water at a quicker rate to keep the towers full so they can keep supplying water to the departments. So there are a lot of moving parts and pieces that generally people don't see in an instance like this. And kudos to those guys. And they stayed throughout the night and early until their shift started the next day at 7 o'clock to make sure the support was there that the fire department needed in order to do their job. So kudos to those teams. And again, you know, if you were out there, you've seen the video, Assistant Chief Pernesti explained it all. So, and again, I just wanted to reach out to drones. We had the drones out yesterday to check on up there and check the temperature for the fire department so they could keep an eye on that because there's still stuff that is smoldering inside there. So kudos to everybody. That's all I have unless anybody has any questions.
I got a question for you.
Chief Whiteley.
Yeah, to echo what Kevin said, there was issues that happened as a result of that fire that created a lot of problems. A lot of the power went out to intersections throughout the northeast part of the city. In each one of them intersections would have required policemen to be in there to at least one policeman per intersection, some of them two. And we didn't have the manpower. But several years ago, we went through the police and communications department and we purchased the equipment and they put it in for a generator backup so that we got a hold of the electricians. They went out, hooked up generators, and we didn't have to tie up policemen in intersections anymore. The two good things about that was we didn't have the policemen to do that. And number two, you never want policemen directing traffic. It's too dangerous. It's too dangerous for the officers. So there were side effects of that fire that proper city planning ahead of time helped us to alleviate those issues too. So I got to tell you, I was very impressed with all the departments involved and how they just jumped to take care of what needed to be taken care of.
Yeah. Mr. Oswald, you did have another question.
Yeah, through you, Mr. President. So now, not knowing the time frame of this, will somebody go through and check the integrity of those power lines to make sure that they didn't get damaged so that we have a problem on down the road? You know, what kind of after work will we be doing to make sure that all this heat didn't do some damage that we're going to find out about later? Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President, I'll defer that to Assistant Chief Pernesti. I know we were working with Ohio Edison on those lines. So Assistant Chief.
Yeah, we met that night or early in the morning. I talked to Ohio Edison about 4 a.m. and they said that they looked at them. They were not burned to the point where basically they'll be able to flip the switch and get it back on if they haven't done so.
So they pulled power?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right, very good. Thanks again, Assistant Chief Fire Pernesti, for your efforts. Okay. Finance Director Pileski.
Thank you, Mr. President. Today being March the 1st and the first working day of the month, we received our first of 2 monthly distributions from the Regional Income Tax Agency. This one amounted to $1,458,467. If you compare that to the March 1 of 2020 distribution, we are down $480,984 for a drop of 24.8%. So as you remember, February was good, but March is starting out bad. So hopefully we will recoup some of this in the second distribution. So I'll keep you informed when that comes in, and we'll go from there.
Very good. Any questions for Mr. Pileski? Water Director Deary?
President Stewart, I have no report this evening. Thank you.
Right. Assistant Safety Service Director Firestein?
Thank you, Mr. President. No report tonight.
Assistant Safety Service Director Calvert?
Thank you, Mr. President. I was struggling to unmute there for a second. I just want to echo all the sentiments, appreciating Assistant Chief Pernesti, the entire fire department, mutual aid, and all the city departments that worked so well together to really fight what could have been a catastrophic fire, even further beyond what it was. It was very impressive. And I appreciate it as much as everyone else on the call tonight. I did want to share with council that we have been in communication with the building owner since the day of the fire. And we are working forward with him to support a plan for redevelopment. So unfortunately, this fire has changed the course of plans. There were plans in place for redevelopment in the very near term. And obviously the damage that was caused to the structure, the demolition that will need to occur, any environmental abatement that needs to happen, all of those things will extend that time frame quite a bit. And that, you know, could potentially change the form that that development takes. So we will have further details. The mayor will be sharing some information at his State of the City address on Thursday, March 4th. So we'll have further details at that time, but I did want you to know that we are working together with the developer very collaboratively to solve this hurdle and then get the development going as quickly as possible.
Good, thank you. All right, Assistant Director Flanders.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. President. No report, but do have a reminder. Just wanted to remind everyone for the State of the City address on Thursday. It is virtual. To sign up for that virtual address, you can go to cityofelyria.org/calendar. Again, cityofelyria.org/calendar. The event details are there, and how to register is also linked there. You will need to register to participate in the Zoom experience.
Thank you. Elyria Police Department, Chief Whiteley.
Yes, I have one thing to request from council. Last year, we had signed up Lieutenant Baker to attend the international training seminar. She runs our training division. We paid for the airfare and everything, and then COVID hit and everything got canceled. They are running it this year. It's in St. Louis, the same place. We have the voucher. She has the voucher for the airfare that will be expiring shortly. It's at the end of March. She has received her 2 COVID shots already, and we are requesting permission because it is 80 miles outside the $500 range or 500 mile range. So we need council permission for her to attend that training.
Can I get a motion from council?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Mitchell, second by
Gillette.
Second by Mr. Tolet. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Any other comments, Chief?
No, just you know, the things that we do to prepare in the city and the department for future events. I think this fire really showed that. I told you about the intersections, but you know, a couple of years ago, we went out on a venture of the drones with a promise of what these can be used for was really unlimited. And as you could hear from Assistant Fire Chief Pernesti, you know, something that really wasn't thought that it would be used a lot for is being used a ton. Mapping the downtown area is one of them that benefit them. And then when you put the infrared camera on it and put it up, it shows the hot spots of where everything is. It directs the firemen to where the fire or the water needs to go. So I give a lot of credit to, you know, the city and the people working around to come up with these ideas for us to almost like preventative preemptive measures to make it easier down the path.
Thank you. Any questions for the chief? Mr. Oswald?
I guess I'm filled with questions, sorry. But when you bought those drones, I was curious why you had to have two of them. And then I was explained that if you run them for so long, the batteries will run out and then the other one will take over. Did this happen in that case?
It did. What happens is if conditions are perfect, the batteries will run for 25 to 40 minutes. When you add rain or heavy winds, it wears the batteries out quicker. These drones are the identical drones, and they're set up software wise. So when one's ready to come down, the other will take off, go up, take over the taping, and the other one comes down to get a new battery in it. So you can have a never-ending supply and keep those drones up 100% of the time if you need to be. We did put the drones down during the fire for time to time because the winds were so heavy. We didn't want to damage the drones, but whenever the fire department needed them, they were up. And if, at the points when we brought them down, they weren't needed. And then as the night went on, the wind seemed to die down a little bit, and they could stay up longer if needed.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Thank you. Parks Director, Mrs. Reardon.
No report tonight.
Engineering, Mr. Schneider.
No report, Mr. President.
Have I forgotten anybody? I think I got everybody. All right, very good. President's referrals and remonstrances. Mr. Laco, could you please help me with that?
Sorry, Vic, hold on. I was having a hard time finding my mute button.
Yeah.
Item 1, community development. Item 2, community development planning commission. Item 3, finance. Item 4, finance. Item 5, finance. Item 6, finance. Item 7, finance. Items 8 and 9, receive and place on file, copied to all council members.
Thank you, Mr. Laco. Petitions and remonstrances from council members.
There's one, Mr. Tolet.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to withdraw at this time. Thank you, though.
Petitions and
No, that was it. Go ahead.
Petitions and remonstrances from the lobby.
There are none.
Reports of standing and special committees.
There are none.
Resolutions first reading.
Sponsored by Community Development and Finance. A resolution adopting the 2020 report of the Elyria Tax Incentive Review Council and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Callahan.
Mr. President, I move that this resolution be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Mr. Tolet. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Resolution 2021-4. Sponsored by Community Development. A resolution appointing Brenda K. Davis to the Lorraine Energy Special Improvement District Board.
Mr. Callahan.
Mr. President, I move that this resolution be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Ms. Mitchell. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
Question to call. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Nay. Motion carried.
Resolution 2021-5. Sponsored by Finance, a resolution finding that the city has unfit for municipal use certain city property.
Mr. Tolet,
Mr. President, I move that this resolution be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question?
Question's been called on the suspension. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
2021-6. Sponsored by Finance, an ordinance authorizing the Director of Safety Service of the City of Elyria to dispose of, by the best means possible, city property that is unfit for municipal use.
Mr. Tolet,
Mr. President, I move that this ordinance is passed under suspension of rules in its first reading.
Second.
second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question?
Questions have been called on the suspension. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2021-36. That's all resolutions first reading.
Resolutions, second reading.
There are none.
Resolutions, third reading.
There are none.
Ordinances, first reading.
Sponsored by Finance, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a professional services agreement with Rotzel and Andrus, a legal professional association for legal counseling, labor matters, and declaring emergency.
Mr. Tolet,
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
second by Ms. Davis. Is there any discussion?
Question?
Questions have been called. On suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2021-37. Sponsored by Finance, an ordinance amending ordinance 216-6, known as the salary ordinance, including ordinance 219-96, to create the position of Finance Department Specialist, non-bargaining classified, effective February 28th, 2021.
Mr. Tolet,
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
Questions have been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2021-38. Sponsored by Finance, an ordinance amending ordinance 2016-6, known as the salary ordinance, including ordinance number 219-96, to establish a 1% raise and a $250 stipend for certain Chapter 165 employees, non-elected official, effective February 28th, 2021, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Tolet,
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed in its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
Questions have been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
2021-39. Sponsored by Utilities, an ordinance authorizing the mayor to submit an application to the Ohio Department of Health and accept, if offered, the Fluoridation Assistance Program grant for a new fluoride feeder and auxiliary feed testing equipment for the Elyria Water Pumping Plant and declare an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell,
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2021-40. Sponsored by Utilities. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the purchase and installation of a new fluoride feeder and auxiliary feed testing equipment for the Elyria Water Pumping Plant and declare an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell,
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
Questions have been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2021-41. Sponsored by Utilities. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to apply for and if offered, accept and enter into a water supply revolving loan account, WSRLA agreement through the Ohio EPA for the replacement of lead service lines and galvanized service lines, public and private sides in the city of Elyria and declare an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell,
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2021-42. Sponsored by Utilities. An ordinance authorizing the mayor to advertise for bids and enter into a contract for the replacement of lead services and galvanized service lines, public and private sides in the city of Elyria and declare an emergency.
Ms. Mitchell,
Mr. President, I ask that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
second by Ms. Davis. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2021-43. Sponsored by Community Development and Finance. An ordinance amending the Community Development Block Grant CDBG Program Year 2020 Annual Action Plan and declare an emergency.
Mr. Callahan,
Mr. President, I move that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules and declared an emergency.
Second.
second by Mr. Tolet. Is there any discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, on the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Mr.
Point of
President,
order,
did you
I'm
take
sorry.
a motion on the emergency?
Yeah, my
Thank
point
you.
of order, my apologies. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2021-44. Sponsored by Community Development and Finance. An ordinance approving the application for the Downtown Facade Improvement Program created by ordinance 2019-19 for improvements at 333 Broad Street, Elyria, Ohio.
Mr. Callahan.
Mr. President, I move that this ordinance be passed on its first reading under suspension of rules.
Second.
Second by Mr. Tolet. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. On the suspension, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
2021-45. That's all ordinances first reading.
Ordinance's second reading.
Sponsored by Community Development. An ordinance granting a conditional use permit pursuant to Chapter 1135 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Elyria, Ohio, to Dominic D. Price and Courtney R. Price for Type A in-home child care at real property located at 108 Regency Court, Elyria, Ohio.
I declare that this public hearing has had its second readings scheduled for March 15th, 2021 at 7 p.m. in council chambers, also Zoom and live stream.
That's all ordinances second reading.
Ordinance's third reading.
Sponsored by Community Development. An ordinance amending section 1131.02 codified ordinances of the City of Elyria, Ohio, known as the zoning ordinance to rezone certain real property located at 621 49th Street, Elyria, Ohio, from a B-N Business Neighborhood District to a B-AO Business Automotive Orient District.
Mr. Callahan.
Mr. President, I move that this ordinance be passed on its third reading.
Second.
Second by Ms. Mitchell. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2021-46. Sponsored by Community Development. An ordinance amending section 1131.02 codified ordinances of the City of Elyria, Ohio, known as zoning ordinance to rezone real property located at 4900 Midway Mall and 4950 Midway Mall, Elyria, Ohio, from a B-G Business General District to a L-I Light Industrial District and declare an emergency.
Mr. Callahan.
Mr. President, I move that this ordinance be passed on its third reading and declared an emergency.
Second.
Second by Ms. Mitchell. Is there any further discussion?
Question.
Question's been called. On the emergency, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. On the passage, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
Ordinance 2021-47. That's all ordinances third reading.
Committee calls.
Community Development requests the presence of the Law Director, Safety Service Director, Building Inspector, and Engineer on 3/8, streamed live at 6 p.m. All referred items. Finance requests the presence of the Mayor, Law Director, Finance Director, Safety Service Director, and Engineer on 3/8, immediately following Community Development. All referred items. And Strategic Planning requests the Mayor, Safety Service Director, Auditor, and Solicitor 3:15, streamed live, immediately following council, all referred items. That's all committee calls.
Thank you. Miscellaneous and unfinished business. Mr. Jesse.
Thank you, Mr. President, through you. We all love this city. We all are agreed in the fact that we want it to be thriving. We want to encourage people to come. We want to encourage families to come. We want to encourage businesses to come. And I have some concerns. We all know that when people are looking at a community in which to live, one of the first things they look at is the quality of the school systems. Our school system is excellent. Many of us, even some of you that went to Elyria Catholic, you know how good the Elyria public schools are. And of course, now with all the new buildings, they look at the condition of the streets. And issue 6 has provided $7 million in street repair over the last few years. They look at the quality of the safety forces. I don't need to say any more about that tonight. That's been on display very clearly. By the way, if I'm not mistaken, at least part of the money for those drones came from issue 6. That makes me very proud. Is that correct, Chief?
The drones themselves were purchased by the water pumping station. And then the training and the software were purchased by the police department. I cannot quote you where the money came from those two, whether it was issue 6 or police levy, but it came from one of them.
Okay. But I have a number of concerns about our city parks. And city parks are a huge determining factor for people when they want to move in the city. They're a huge determining factor for thousands and thousands of our residents, for many of you on council, for your children who have gone through programs. And we're behind. We're behind other cities in terms of rolling out our programming after the virus. It has nothing to do with the outstanding job our director, Carrie Reardon, does. The problem is we do not have enough full-time staff. And that is really one of the major issues. I've done a considerable amount of research on this. I've spoken with past park directors. I've spoken with park board members, spoken with many of you, spoken with former park employees, current park employees, and many residents. And the consensus is overwhelming. We want to return to the programming that we had prior to the virus, certainly under protocols that make things safe. We want to return to the vast majority of the programs we've had. And we're not, we certainly don't mind looking into how we can make things better and how we can expand. I saw it posted that our pools are going to open on June 15th, which is wonderful. Our pools at East Rec and North that weren't open last year. However, it is very clear to me that that cannot be done efficiently without hiring another full-time staff member. And doing some research, one of our employees who was laid off last year, Ryan Fry, his full-time job was running the pools and running the ice rink. He has the expertise, the experience, and the desire to come back. And I'm also concerned with the fact that his layoff letter said it was due to financial concerns. We always are mindful of our budget, but our situation is drastically different than it was a year ago. Mr. Pileski, do we have enough money to bring back a full-time parks employee to run the pools and the ice rink?
Through you, Mr. President. Obviously, we ended the year better than what we had hoped, and that's definitely because of the stimulus money that we received. So the CARES Act money was able to pay for all the remote status pay that went out, plus the police and fire wages for a period of time. So we carried more money over than what we had anticipated, and actually more than what we ever had before, but to be honest with you, in the general fund. The challenge going forward, as you know, is we still don't know where the economy is going to fall with this pandemic. We're still struggling with our income tax revenues, and we still have a hurdle to cross when Bendix closes. But as of right now, there seems to be money to bring somebody back, yes.
Okay, excellent. I also want to address, there seems to be some misunderstanding out there in the community, at least among some people, about why some of our rec centers aren't reopened. We had a little bit of a argument and disagreement back in April and May when everything was shut down. And this body, Elyria City Council, was very adamant that we didn't want any of our rec centers opened at that time because we didn't have any of our city employees to oversee those. We didn't have a parks director. We didn't have all of our full-time staff had either been laid off or reassigned to other departments. So even though there were very deserving groups that would have benefited from using those facilities, we made the decision that it was not, from a legal standpoint, from a health and safety standpoint, it wasn't a good idea to open up any of those rec centers until we had our staff back. And now we're at least partway there, even though, like I said, I'm very adamant that we need at least one more full-time staff member as soon as possible so that that person can get the pools up and running in a safe and organized manner. And I know there are programs. I know Mrs. Keys was telling me about some residents that were really interested and very disappointed that the senior programming had not come back to East Rec. Is that what you were telling me, Mrs. Keys?
Yes, there seems to be quite a concern that senior programming has all moved to South, which is wonderful. But in the past, I believe we've been on a rolling program so that senior programming could take place at each of the rec centers on a rolling basis. So I have fielded some phone calls from residents who are extremely concerned that that's not the case now. And they are questioning when that can occur.
So I guess I'd like to ask Mayor Whitfield, what is the issue with bringing back Ryan Fry to run the pools and then obviously take over the ice rink?
Mayor Whitfield?
Yeah, through you, Council President. I'm not going to discuss personnel matters. We've been there, done that. You know, in terms of personnel, I believe that's appropriate, especially when we're talking specific people and their personal business. It shouldn't be discussed in an open forum. It should be discussed in executive session. So that's my perception of that. But in terms of your concern, Councilwoman Keys, I definitely want to make sure that we are in communication with that resident to make sure that they're aware, because what we heard was people thought the program wasn't existing. I think part of the narrative that some people are creating is that programs aren't existing, and they are. And I think for some folks, the first conversation is, I want senior programming back. And then you say, oh, it is, it's just happening in South. They're like, oh, okay, but when is it coming to East? And it's kind of like, we have to, you know, educate people on the fact that there is programming going on. But, you know, I can defer to the Safety Service Director or the Parks Director. You know, we feel like we have a solid plan in place in order to bring back programming this year and have it, you know, pools reopen fully, summer camps, all the programming from before. And again, you know, my hope is that we're expanding. You know, I actually have kids that are in the programs that I want to make sure enjoy the programs. And I want to, you know, I got a community that's relying on our team to come up with the strategy to make sure that we're recovering from COVID and, you know, bringing back things that people love in the city. So, you know, but I'll defer to the Parks Director and to the Safety Service Director in terms of any other details on that.
Right. Mr. Jesse, hold on one second. Let Mr. Reardon comment and then you can follow up. Mr. Reardon, and then if Director Breebaker wants to weigh in on it as well. But Ms. Reardon, are you in the position to kind of bring us an update on where things are at with the parks and then?
Yeah, absolutely. And I do apologize. I'm getting like every other word tonight, so I'm not sure, you know, what's going on with there. But yeah, we, like the mayor said, we actually met today to kind of put a plan in motion as far as rolling out the programs for the summer. So I know as soon as we get some definitive dates with those programming in regards to, we know the pools are going to open June 15th, you know, that's not changing. But in regards to the summer camps and some of the leagues that we're going to bring back, you know, that's obviously all information that we will roll out. And I know, you know, Ren's been very helpful getting the newsletters and things out. So as soon as we get definitive dates with that plan, we'll be rolling that information out.
When will you know that, Ms. Reardon and or Director Flanders? When is that all going to be rolled out as far as these timelines? Do we know that yet, or is that still in the process?
We are still in the process of some of it. We do have a goal of registration, you know, for summer camps that we'll be getting next month. So, you know, a lot of that information will be shored up by then. And then the league information should be following, I would say, in the next 2 to 3 weeks as far as definitive dates.
Okay. Can you just kind of give us an informative of what programs are in motion now, or any programs in motion now that is out there for our residents? Or sorry, but sign up dates are late, but just kind of
absolutely.
There's assurance that those are open.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the rink is still going on, so we have a few more weeks there. Our last open skate will be Friday the 19th. You know, the TAP program, as was mentioned, is still happening Monday through Friday from 9 to noon. We just recently added our open volleyball program. So we have the open volleyball for youth is on Friday nights, and then we have a Saturday and Sunday late afternoon, early evening for the adults for just a drop-in, come play, you know, kind of brush the dirt off a little bit kind of thing. be starting a squeaky sneaker soccer, which is an indoor soccer class that will start on next week on Tuesday. And then our basketball classes are finishing up here. I believe we have 2 more weeks with those.
Okay. Ms. Flanders, did you want to add anything more?
Yeah, in addition to what Director Reardon shared, the only program or kind of option that I'd add that wasn't already mentioned would be the kind of hunt from home. So the Easter egg hunt, this year, obviously not putting that on in person due to COVID, but Director Reardon and some of the staff on Parks and Recreation have worked on an option that would allow it to happen virtually. That registration went live today at noon, so people can get free at-home Easter egg hunt kits from the Elyria Parks and Recreation Department. I'm also going to link for you all the newsletter that outlines all of the programs and where to sign up. But just want to let everyone know that programs are added to the website and Rec Desk. At this point, Director Reardon, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're seeing programs added, if not every 2 weeks, weekly, to Rec Desk for people to sign up. Those newsletters are made available. Director Reardon posts all programs as they become live on the Facebook page for Parks and Recreation. But anytime you're curious about what programs exist, what's been added, I encourage you to go to elyria.recdesk.com.
Very good. Mr. Jesse, did you want to follow up? I know you.
Yeah, I do. Thank you, Mr. President, through you. And so I will certainly go with the mayor's suggestion and not talk about specific personnel, but it's a numbers game. In the past, running all of our excellent programs, we had a parks director and we had 3 more full-time staff to take care of all the other duties in terms of organizing and running programs. We now have our parks director and 1 full-time staff. Now, the numbers game would just tell you, you can't run the kind of program in terms of the success and the quality and the organization with half the full-time staff that you used to have. So I'll ask the mayor to please bring back 1 more full-time person. Why are you not interested in doing that? Why do you think it's not necessary?
Through you, Council President. Again, I'm willing to have this conversation offline. It's clearly more of a concern for you than it is most. But I will say this, that my commitment is making sure we bring the programs back. If you go back to the 80s, you could tell those stories. In the 80s, we had 20 full-time people and they did X, Y, and Z. And we could keep revisiting what we had, or we can look at what we have and appreciate what we have, which is 3 full-time staff within the department. No, actually 10 if you count maintenance staff. And we have talented people who need to just have a shot at just doing a good job at what they do, and let us have the opportunity to fall short, as opposed to spending this energy on this. You could be spending the energy on promoting the programs that exist, promoting what we do have, but instead the energy is put on what we don't have. I think this is a larger problem that we have to overcome as a city. So often our energy is put into what we're missing out on, what we're lacking, as opposed to appreciating what exists, promoting what exists, and doing the best at what exists. And so I would just encourage us to shift the mindset, shift our focus to be on supporting what we do have. And, I think that we have a solid plan in place. We got a solid team in place. And as we grow and the need for expansion occurs, we'll do so. But I'm also listening to those reports of the financials, just trying to be mindful of how to grow things smart. And I don't know about your experience, Mr. Jesse, but I've run an organization before, and I know what it takes to make things happen. And I know how to pull the best out of folks. And we had that meeting, earlier, and we've talked about the team. How do we bring the best out of the folks we have? And so I just asked for us to have a chance at doing that before we cast doubt.
Okay.
And I'm done talking about it. So.
All right. Mr. Tolet, Mr. Jesse, let Mr. Tolet weigh in.
Thank you, Mr. President, through you. Because the layoff was a full-time position due to financial reasons, by law, and this question is directed, I believe, at Director Deary, are we allowed to go into executive session on a known financial issue that's been asked and answered tonight? Does that question make sense, Director Deary?
Yeah, through you, Mr. President. I mean, if we're talking about a specific personnel matter, yes, if council wished to go into executive session, you certainly could. You're not required to, but you certainly can. Yes. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
It does.
Okay.
It does. Thank you.
Ms. Mitchell? You're muted,
Thank
Donna.
you.
Oh, go ahead. You're good. Sorry. Donna, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, excuse me. Having a problem with the mute button tonight. Either to you, to Ms. Reardon or Ms. Flanders, looking into the future, and I know people would like to know, are we gonna have a Memorial Day parade? And I know that everything hinges on COVID and where the numbers are, but you know, these are the type of things that we should be planning for now. So is there gonna be a Memorial Day parade? What about the fireworks? Can you give us any insight into that? Thank you.
Yes, through you, Mr. President. The answer to that question is yes, absolutely yes. We want to go back to offering some of those great things our community is known for. Fireworks, that is scheduled. I believe that contract has already gone through for signature. Things like parades, those will absolutely happen. Those are collaboratively planned with members of the community, organizations, agencies, and we're eager to do that work going into this year. I will just say for some of the other items that people are really interested about, like the farmers markets, things like that, those conversations have already been taking place.
Great.
That planning and scheduling is going on. Those agreements are being discussed and kind of determining what that can look like. That work is happening.
Thank you, Ms. Flanders. Mr. President.
Yes, Ms. Mitchell.
Thank you. If I may just add one thing to Ms. Reardon, and I've told you before, you add a 4-square tournament or whatever to your family fun night, I am there.
All right, we'll keep that in mind.
Mr. Jesse, one more follow-up.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President, through you. Yeah, to the mayor, you said I seem to be the only one concerned about the direction of the parks. I can assure you that is not the case. I can assure you that our many members on council that are, many residents out there, we are behind. And we're behind because we don't have the adequate staff. You also said that I'm looking back to the 80s. I'm looking back to the spring of 2019 and the summer of 2019. That's what I want brought back, is the programs that were proven successful and popular, that made the Parks Department one of the shining jewels of this city. And not looking back to 1980, but what we just had to lose because of the virus. And there are many people out there that share the same concerns that I do. I can assure you, and perhaps you'll be hearing from them.
Thank you. Mr. Brubaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to weigh in real quickly here. The mayor, Ms. Flanders, and Ms. Reardon and I had a meeting today, and there are, as has already been said, there are programs moving forward. There's newsletters out there. We laid out a pretty cognitive plan, a really substantive plan to work with Director Reardon and Nikki, who is the rec supervisor, to get some of this stuff going. And we are committed, as the mayor said, that, you know, as this programming, it's going to blossom. We already know that. We know it's going to blow up as far as people are wanting this. And that's what we're taking a look at. Ms. Reardon has agreed to take on some additional roles with help from other folks to do some of these things. We are going to bring back the program. The program is going to come off. I think you're going to see Mr. Jesse and regular other council members, you're going to see our programming take off. If we need to add personnel, we have that capability through Mr. Pileski's report and through the safety service director and the mayor's office. So we are looking at those things and we are evaluating them. And we've told Ms. Reardon that when it gets to that point, even before it gets to that point, we've got to be able to see that, to make that quick decision to hire that other person if that's what we need to do. So programming is there, and I appreciate everybody's concerns, but you're going to see, we already talked about today, actually, Ms. Reardon and I want to talk about later this week on how we're going to be able to open up our rec centers and our other buildings to allow for rentals. As you know, the governor has started to allow that stuff. So now we're going to start looking at that. We're going to have the basketball hoops put back out this spring. So there's a lot of things that are moving forward, and we've got to have a chance to deal with that.
Mr. Jesse, I'll give you one more question.
Okay, and this is my last one. So what I'm hearing, Mr. Brubaker, thank you, Mr. President, through you. What I'm hearing is that there is a commitment. I want to hear that there's a commitment and a promise to rehire another full-time staff member when it is clear that the need is there. Do I have that assurance?
Mr. President, through you, here's what we will commit. we're going to evaluate this. And when that need arises and we get to the point that we have to, then we'll make that determination. That's what we'll commit to you.
Okay, I will look forward to that.
Okay. I think it's just obviously the passion is there for our parks. We've had numerous discussions in regard to that. And I think we know we're just, we know that this is really going to take off, like Mr. Brubaker has said, and the mayor has said, Ms. Flanders, we're passionate about it. We want to give every opportunity to our residents to take advantage of those opportunities as well. And we want to be prepared for it. And I think that's what we're hoping for. And we feel that you guys are going to be committed to doing all that. So I would open more conversation, maybe in a private forum with the administration, if they're open for that, just to kind of make sure there's clarity on maybe a direction and things like that. So I would welcome that if the administration would, and we'll try to plan for that. But is there any other further discussion in regards to anything else? Moving on with the city, Ms. Mitchell.
Mr. President, if I may just quickly, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Second Baptist Church. They had a vaccine clinic today. It was packed. It was well ran. This was the first dose. And so they'll be following up in a couple of weeks so everyone can go back and get their second dose. And I especially want to thank Councilwoman Simmons for providing cookies for everyone.
Wow.
So it was very nice, and thank you. Thank you, Second Baptist. Thank you, Diane.
Was it mobile, Donna? Was it just kind of just driving your car, you go in, or what?
It was inside the church.
Okay.
Yep. And Second Baptist is in Mrs. Simmons' ward, so thank you, Diane.
Excellent. Ms. Davis, do you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. And I also would like to give kudos to Second Baptist and of course to Councilwoman Simmons for a supply of cookies that I enjoyed while I had a chance to visit there. As you can see, I got my first dosage. So, and I tell you, people make you think that it's gonna hurt. It went so fast and I was laughing and talking. I thought I was supposed to sit there and the lady said, you got to go. But if, don't be afraid, and I'm fine. I feel great. I don't even know if I got the shot or not. I'm kind of wondering. So kudos to Second Baptist and to reaching out to all the churches in the area from all over the city. They had a chance to reach out to St. Mary's, that I know these things for a fact, and all the other churches. So they kind of coordinated together with the Lorain County Health Department. So that will be coming around again. They're going to be in Lorain at Faith Ministry on Wednesday. The church is in Lorain. So you still could go there if you need to and sign up. You call on the phone and sign up and it would direct you. So please get your shots if you haven't.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Davis.
For your leadership on that.
Ms. Keys, is that you?
Yes, through you, Mr. President. I'd just like to give a shout out to two, a Boy Scout troop and a Girl Scout troop in our city. Boy Scout troop 122, Girl Scout troop 1122. A couple Saturdays ago after our big snowfall, they volunteered to help dig out some elderly residents and some handicapped residents. And it was a great showing. Dads came with their snow blowers and kids and shovels. And even Mrs. Keys was out there with her shovel. And we managed to dig out lots and lots of elderly folks. And it just was a great Saturday.
Excellent.
So shout out to them.
Thank you, Mrs. Keys. Thank you. Mr. Oswald.
Through you, Mr. President. Occasionally, well, more than occasionally, I get down to City Hall. Of course, I got to go to the building department, and I'm one of the fortunate ones that has a key card and get in. I still, for the life of me, don't understand why that department's not open. They are doing so much extra work and running because the doors are closed, and then getting prints dropped off and everything else. It's a one-on-one situation. You walk in the door and you meet with one person, you have a mask on. So I don't understand it. It makes it very difficult for somebody, a homeowner that wants to get a permit. They walk in, they get paperwork, they walk out. When they're through, they come back, they hand it to them, they pay for it, it's done. So I would like to see that department open up, but then this is going to roll into my next question. I want the administration to be safe at City Hall. And I don't know if there's a way that the safety service director or somebody in the administration could figure out a vaccine seminar at the administration for all the people that work there so that they are safe. You would think that they would be able to be added to the list, not just the 60 and over right now and the other people at risk. So I guess maybe I'm asking for somebody to look into that so we can get them to get their shots sooner than later. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Rubeck or the mayor, do you want to comment on the building
Thank you, Council
department?
President. Yeah, just in terms of the vaccines, we've been in close communication with the health department, and as much as we want to jump the line, as much as I'm anxious to get our staff to jump the line, part of what we're doing is we have to wait till it's our turn. And Terry Corzine has done a great job trying to advocate to bump our folks up into the next level, but we just have to be patient and wait for our turn. And fortunately now with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine being released, we're hoping the vaccination process will speed up more. In terms of the City Hall being open, it is open. All departments are open. So the only difference now is that we ask people to check in at the utility window. Again, with the utility window having the ability to have the glass and the separation between folks to kind of be a barrier, that if there's just a need to drop something off, there's no reason for you to walk around the building, potentially if you're sick, contaminating, there's a check-in point. But the building is open, and I guess I'll let the director speak to any other questions you have.
Mr.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. I know it's getting late, so I'll be brief. Yeah, as the mayor said, it's open 9 to 3, and the way our City Hall is configured, there's really no other way other than the way we're doing it right now to control accessibility to City Hall, because we have no way of shutting off the second and the third floors from people just to wander around. And sometimes we get that anyways, but we will certainly look at other ways to accommodate, particularly with the building department people.
So at this particular time, Kevin, if they want to come in and do a fence permit or whatever, are they able to come in and go over to the building department and do that, or how does that work?
Well, yes, through you, Mr. President, there's actually 2 ways. The technology allows them to print that permit right offline, email it in, mail it in, or they can check in at public utilities. I know there have been people that have brought their permit in, their fee, and dropped it off at public utilities, and Mary goes over and gets it. But if they need to meet with somebody, then they will call over to the building department and someone will come over and meet with them. But there might be other ways that we could look at to help streamline that.
And that is all online, right?
All our permits are online. Yes, sir.
Okay. And that information about it, getting there and coming to the City Hall is online as well.
That I believe it is, but it's also on the doors. But I'll work with IT and Ms. Flanders to make sure that if it's not, that it gets on there.
Okay, thank you. Hearing no other business, Mr. Baird. Moved by Mr. Baird.
Is he sleeping?
Second. I'm muted. Now I see. Mr. Chairman, we adjourn. We adjourn.
Moved by Mr. Baird.
Second.
Second by Mr. Sarah. Any further discussion?
Question.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, nay. Motion carried. Thank you.
Good night, everybody. Be
Good night,
safe.
everybody.